So Pam is going to be someone who's probably new to many of you in the organization, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to invite her today. So thank you for coming from New York, and hopefully you had other reasons to be, of course, in town. Pam joined First Data in February. And has a very strong reputation. You should see her biography. You should, are you on LinkedIn? They should check you out. She has built her brand by transforming operating models in other very prestigious organizations, focusing both on the transformation of those models and also on client engagement. So a wonderful handoff from Brian Gowdy to Pam. She has had experiences both at Smith Barney, at JP Morgan. You've heard a little bit about those two companies and the other leadership there, both in the wealth management area. Her focus within First Data are two areas, and these are really big. One is on product commercialization. I don't have to define that to the people in this room. We either suffer from or benefit from discipline in the processes around product definition and launches. So that is one of her areas to set up that go-to-market set of procedures. But today, what she's going to focus on is the client engagement part of things, the client experience. And she's going to talk about our new end-to-end client experience and the way that we're going to transform our serving of customers, our clients. Oh my goodness, clients. So
it's really great to be here. I know there's a lot of new lingo, right? There's a lot of new lingo coming into the company, right? We're transforming. We're thinking about clients, not customers. We're talking about deepening relationships. We're talking about end-to-end experience. We're talking about discipline, right? Rigor, lots of kind of new things. So, you feel free to ask questions throughout this. What I wanted to do was really talk a little bit about, Karen said, well, can you explain what makes the ideal client experience? And then how it applies to all of you and how you can all be a part of it and how you are really, really important part of it. And I'll get to that towards the end. You'll see that. But, as we think about it, and I heard lots of the key words from Brian Gowdy, right? So it's interesting that, every person who comes on here, we all work very closely together in the transformation. But as we step back and think about, the new First Data, it means we need to focus differently, right? And it means that we need to work differently. And so you see it from the sales process, right? We now have teams. We have business consultants who are deepening relationships. We're going to be working in teams, very much, honestly, like a financial services model, right? Where you have the business consultant dealing with the client and you've got the team dedicated to them so they can really understand the client, which then gives you the opportunity to understand their needs, right? And provide solutions, right? And I'm sure you've heard that, you've seen that. That's not a new concept, but that's really how that model works. And so what is also really important is that we no longer align ourselves across the organization by product, but we align by function, right? So every function has a really, really critical role in delivering the product and serving the client and in ensuring the client experience. But what that also means is you need a lot more coordination, a lot more communication, and a lot more discipline, right? Which is hard. And this organization, since I've been here a few months, is really complex, right? It's really complex. We have, a lot of different types of clients, even within the SMB space. In particular, we operate on many platforms which are still spinning in my head and I'm still trying to understand them, but I have some really good partners who really understand this stuff that I go to all the time. And we have many distribution systems that work very differently. And so it's even more important for us to be organized in a way and really disciplined across all of those and really thinking about the experience for the client. Because out there, it's First Data. And, I understand BAMS is the branding, et cetera, but out there it's First Data and it's our reputation as a company. And so it needs to feel as seamless as it possibly can be. So that being said, I heard the word transparency from Brian Gowdy. That's a word I use all the time. I'm very big on transparency. I think that comes into play with everything you all do, right? We need to be transparent with our clients. not only in what the product is, what the value prop is, why the client needs it, but why we charge them and what we charge them and how we show it to them, right? So I'm sure many of you have seen the voice of the client research, right? You probably don't need the voice of the client research if you actually looked at one of our statements. Because if you actually looked at one of our statements and you looked at the billing section, and I didn't bring one with me, I'm sure. I brought a couple of little show and tells, but I didn't bring this. But literally, if you look at the SMB client statement, the fee section is just a list of every fee that hits every day all the way down the list, right? No groupings for the products and services versus the association fees versus the networking fees versus all the other things. And so when our clients say, you're nickel and diming me, and that you're not giving me transparency and I don't understand it, they're right, right? They're right. And so we just need to always step back and say, if I were Joe's Pizza Shop, right, or Karen's Pizza Shop, how do I understand this, right? It's just, it sounds so simple, hard to execute and hard to transform, but that's what we have to do in everything we do here. Everything we do every day. Sit back and sit in the client's position and say, what does that feel like to me as a small business owner? Or as, you know, a merchant of 10 outlets, whatever it is. And so that comes into place everywhere. So how do we, you know, execute on this new First Data client experience, right? It starts with really understanding what happens today and mapping out what we want it to look like for tomorrow. So the reason why I think it's really important to start with what's today is because you have to leverage what you have, right? I mean, we don't just throw it up in the air and start over, right? So actually, a couple of months ago, as we're launching all these new products for the SMB space, right, Clover and Perka and analytics and cybersecurity bundle, right? They're all being developed in parallel, quite frankly, right, Karen? They're in parallel. And so, but yet, we want to go out to our clients and say, this is a bundled solution, right? This is our SMB suite. How do we do that when we're building in silos? And so no, don't show that yet, please. Take that off, sorry. No, that's my end, Sorry, that's my ending. So you told me TED Talk, very few slides. I follow instructions. I'm a little kind of anal about that. A little disciplined, sorry. So actually, a couple of months ago, I needed to understand what was happening, right? What's happening today with the way we're developing products? What should it look like? Where are our collisions? You know, how big a problem is this? All of that. So, you know, I'm big on just bringing people into a room, and I know that's so hard here because we're all over the place, right? So a few of us met here in the Innovation Lab, actually. And I pulled in a couple people who know a lot. I pulled in Ronnie Mongan. So any of you who have been around know Ronnie Mongan. She knows everything about everything. She runs our boarding, but she knows everything about everything and really thinks like a client. I pulled in Kelly Castell, because he's running the client experience service specialist team, right? And knows everything about everything. And then Scott Sanchez and a couple of his folks. And we did this exercise where we brought in each of the product teams, and they mapped out what they're building, what their client experience is that they're building, right? So client, you know, we get the lead, the client says yes, what happens with the application, what happens with the documentation, do they get an email that tells them they're in? You know, how do they know? What happens when they click on the email? Where does it go? How many times do they have to click again? And you get the picture, right? And so we did that with the as-is for the 4 new products. And, you know, we had a little indigestion. And then we said, okay, what could it be? And we took a whole new board, and we started mapping out, you know, what it might look like and where we could align all of those activities. You know, none of our systems can do this today, but, you know, which I don't think surprises many of you. But that's where we need to get to, right? And so we have a lot of work to do. That was kind of just the beginning. We're also hiring someone to head up client experience who can actually help, you know, move all this forward. But that was the first step in just understanding how far we are away from, you know, what that holistic experience could be. But at the same time that we have this big vision, we're also chipping away at a number of different things, right, around the company that make it a more holistic and better experience, right? So everything from the tools, when we think about the client tools and the online experience, we're investing in those. We're investing in Business Track. We're looking at our statements, and I'll talk about some of those specific activities. Documentation, which we'll talk about in a minute. A few months ago, a number of us had a demo of Clover. Really exciting, really cool. I'm sure you've all seen it. If not, you'll see it, right? Very, very cool. And we're walking through the experience of Clover. Real life, client signs up, and then up pops the MPA, the Merchant Processing Agreement, and the program guide. And right at the top, it said page 1 of 99. Right, you're all laughing, but think about it, right? Joe's Pizza Shop, 99 pages of legal language. And so we're going to get to what we're doing about that. But those are the kinds of things, we don't need to wait for a big study, right? We don't need a big analysis. We know what's wrong with that. And so let's figure out who to put in the room and what we need to do to fix it. It just isn't that hard. It takes accountability and ownership, right? Those are the two things. And so, what the lawyers will say, because the lawyers are on the team now, what the lawyers will say is, we've been waiting to do this forever. And when I ask the question, well, how come you haven't done it if you've been waiting forever? Well, we never had a business partner. We never had someone who cared and could own it, right? Because everyone contributes to that document. There's no one person owning it. So I think that's also really important, is the accountability and the ownership. And so, in everything we do and as we think about it, the accountability and the ownership is important. Who's accountable? Who's got that takeaway? Who's running with that? Who else needs to come into the fold? Things don't just happen. We're a big place, right? And a lot going on, and things can fall through the cracks. So that's kind of the discipline that I always think about in how we execute. So some key things that are underway, which just wanted to kind of let you know are on the radar. We've started working on. Obviously need to build out the team, because right now you're looking at it. So the first is the client, but again, leveraging everything that happens every day in this organization, right? So statements and statement fees. So we're looking at the SMB statement. We're looking at how many people get this daily statement, how many people get it monthly, because we have different versions of statements, some that show you all the daily details, some show you the monthly. We're looking at what happens online. So a couple of things. One, the online tool is underway to have a lot of work done. Business Track, right? And we're going to talk about tool names, because we use Business Track, we use Client Line. I'm really confused. So if I'm confused, I assume our clients are confused. And so, we're going to look at the online statement and what do we really want to represent there? What are the top things that clients need to know? And this work was done a year and a half ago, quite frankly, when we had the SMB organization being formed, and there were some focus groups and work done. What are the 5 things that a merchant needs to know every day when they pull up their online, right? There aren't that many variables, right? They need to know their funding. They need to know it by credit card. They need to know if there were returns. That's what they need to know. So let's put it on one page really cleanly. And then, because it's an online tool, you have the opportunity to drill in, right? So, oh, gee, I want to know more about that. Let me go drill. So the team's got a great plan. That's Melissa Bubar and her team, great plan to execute on that. We're also going to clean up the statement online, because quite frankly, if clients are looking daily or want daily information, to me, that's not a monthly paper statement, right? That's an online tool. Your monthly paper statement, if you still need to get the paper, should be some kind of summary version. Otherwise, you should go online, is my view, right? Cheaper, better for the environment, lots of reasons, right? We just charged people $7 in our spring release recently for staying on paper. That's not a strategy. And Brian Gowdy said it, right? There was a revenue generator. That's not a strategy, right? We should have a paper suppression strategy with our clients, because we care about the environment. It's better for them, and they don't need the paper sitting around, right? So we are, we're gonna look at that and fix all of that, right? And make the things that are important in there. And then we need to talk about online. We need to promote online more. Less than 40% of our SMBs actually use Business Track. Kind of shocking, right? All those people are on the internet. You know they're probably using other companies' websites, whether it's banks, brokerage firms, whatever, right, financial institutions. They should be using more. And so I think we have a great opportunity to do more with that, certainly from a tool perspective and making it better and more user-friendly, but also from a marketing perspective, right? Talking about it, making sure that it is the first place that clients should be going, not the last place they should be going. So I think that's something, that you all can clearly contribute to. Then when I think about, sales tools, so that's client tools, then we've got sales tools, right? Boarding. How do we make it easy for our BCs to board our clients, right? Right now, not every product is SNAP eligible. SNAP's a fantastic tool. I don't know if you all have seen it, but it's pretty intuitive, pretty user-friendly, walks you through the questions. It's smart enough to know what to ask you. It's got all the things that you would need, but it doesn't apply to all products. So Lonnie Mungan's working on that, getting all of that in there, so that becomes the place of choice. We also obviously need to work on connectivity. What we hear from salespeople is, I get to a place, they don't have great Wi-Fi, I can't use it. So I end up pulling out this piece of paper and, back to the paper, right, that we talked about. So they're working on that as well. So lots of things that we can do, again, thinking about what happens to that BC, because it's not only the merchant experience and the client experience, it's the BC experience, right? We need to make it easy for our salespeople to do business and easy for our clients to do business with us. So it works on both sides. Client data. I know you all suffer from our challenges with client data, right? So my understanding is right now we don't have a great hierarchy, terminal to location to merchant, so that as you want to communicate with a group of clients, you can't really pull a clean list, right? We're seeing that in a lot of the work that we're doing with our new products, right? When we talk about the security bundle and who has what today, and how do we price it, and all of that kind of stuff, right? And how do we transition clients from this to that? You need to know what the this is before you can move them to the that. And so that's a challenge. In the previous places I came from, we spent a lot of time and invested in client data. It's a real discipline. And so we're actually, someone is starting in the next month or so who's going to be accountable for client data and own client data, right? And so they are going to sit in the sales organization, in the Jim Contardi organization, and they're responsible for client data. But not just for sales, but for the whole company, right? So I'll have a kind of, say, and other people will participate as well. But, it's back to the basics, right? Understanding the basics in order to deliver on that. Then two other pieces. Product commercialization, we talked about just very briefly, but the discipline around the product commercialization. How when our product teams are developing a product, they're not just thinking about developing the product itself, but they're thinking about how that product actually gets used by the client. And I don't mean just launched, with marketing and sales and all of that, how the client uses it. What does it feel like when the client is using it? Again, when we did this little exercise in the Innovation Lab, we looked at the security bundle. The security bundle has a number of different products in it. That's, so it's its own bundle, right? It's a bundle in a bundle. And how do you, what does that mean to the client? So we actually walked through it. And you know what? The client had to click too many times. They're never going to do it, right? It's a product that, is kind of mandatory, right? It's not sexy. It's security. You need it. But, some clients, according to the focus group, said, well, gee, don't you just give that to me anyway because you're first data, right? Why am I even paying for it? And now you're going to make me click and do all this stuff? Not a great experience. So the team's fixing that, right? I think we're down to 2 clicks now. Pretty good, considering we're using some outside vendors. So again, it's how do we execute on it, and what does every step of that process mean to the user, whether the user is the client or the user is a salesperson, right? We've got to always have that mindset. So we're institutionalizing a lot of that as we speak. Then my favorite is the client documentation. And so I wanted to show you an example. So when I saw that, 1 out of 99, and actually I think I was in the room with Guy and Joe, And everyone went, and I was like, okay, got it, first thing on my list to tackle. And it actually was the first thing I tackled. And so when I went to the lawyers, they said, we're open to this, but we need someone to own it. I said, great, okay, here I am. And so I'm a big believer in bringing the people who use all of these things into the conversation, right? Because, I can guess at what I think needs to happen, pretty logical. But many people are really using these and have better ideas. So went to Brian Gowdy and said, I want 6 salespeople to participate in this doc advisory group. I need a document advisory group. So he gave us 6 people, one from each of the different distribution arms, right, within our owned channel, distribution system. And we all met here in Atlanta, and we had 6 lawyers on the team, and we had 6 salespeople, and we talked about the sales process and documentation. I said, I want to hear the pain points on documentation. I know you may have other pain points. Let's just talk about documentation. And we went through their sales process and talked about the documentation and the impacts, created a whole laundry list, as you can imagine, of pain points. And then I tortured them in the afternoon after I fed them, and we actually went through the documents. We pulled them up on the screen, and we actually walked through the document. Like, you got to get your hands dirty, right? You just got to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. We walked through the documents and came up with even more. Out of that, we had, 20 different really big suggestions. And so we are completely rewriting the MPA, the program guide and MPA for the SMB owned space. And we are hoping and assuming that our alliance partners will adopt it as well. And so I want to just show you a little bit about where we're starting and then where we're getting to, and how, it's not that hard, right? It takes commitment, it takes accountability, and it takes partnership. So first slide shows us. So today's program guide is actually 92 pages on average, right? It ranges from 90 to 110 or something like that. And if you actually look at each of those columns, and you don't have to really read them, but what it tells you is that about 50 or 62 or so in the dark blue column are the terms and conditions. And so what happened over time is that every time we launched a new product or service, we added the applicable terms and conditions, never looking at the document and saying, well, gee, did the former terms and conditions actually cover what we're trying to say here? So we just kept adding and adding, and that's because there was no accountability, right? No one's at fault, it just is what it is. And so then you have the blue, which are also, all kinds of specific terms and provisions, but also operating guides. So we have a little bit of a mix here. This program guide is a little bit of our terms and conditions that clients need to sign for, and how they should operate, what they do about a chargeback, what they do about certain procedures. Like, it's a little bit of a mishmash. And then in the red, and it was red intentionally, right? So I use red very judiciously. In the red are products that we very infrequently sell, that we use third parties for. So there's lots of language that we have to incorporate. And so that section alone is like almost 30 pages. So you kind of sit back and say, okay, we're transforming First Data, we're going to a solution-based, we're creating a bundle and a package for our clients. Shouldn't we come forth with something that is relatively seamless regardless of what the product or solution is, that covers everything to the extent possible, right? So we can get away from all these addendums. And shouldn't we write it in English so, Joe's Pizza Shop can actually understand it, right? So, next page. This is what tomorrow looks like. So on track for Q3, we have that green didn't show up so well. General terms we're hoping less than 10 pages. And so what it will be are your general terms that that a client actually needs to sign for, right? In English, covering everything, and we're looking to deliver it online, right? Get away from the paper to the extent possible. And we have, the challenges around you need to make sure that the client actually got it, so that when you have litigation, right, we need to be thoughtful and smart about how we do this and make sure that we protect First Data. But basically, general terms, should be 10 pages. Operating guide, and this is where we're definitely going to need marketing help. this should be a helpful guide on how to run your business and how to, leverage first data, right? It shouldn't be legal. It doesn't need to be legal. You don't need to sign for it. We need to ensure that you get it, but it just needs to be clear English. And so that is all being rewritten as we speak. So then you've got these red boxes at the bottom, right? Infrequently sold products. If they're truly infrequently sold, and we check the data, right? It's all based on the data. And if they're infrequently sold, then we should keep them separate. And we should package them separately for those infrequent occurrences. And so we're in the process of working through all of that. And so and we meet with the lawyers every week, Wednesdays at 3. And as of last week, we are down to the two combined to something like 26 pages. And they won't show me a draft yet. And so I'm really anxious. And I keep saying, well, I want to see it. I want to see it. And they're like, dear, don't worry. You'll see it. I'm like, no, I want to read it. And you know what they said to me last Monday? No one's ever asked to read it. No one's ever asked her. And I said, I want to read it, right? I'm the client, right? And I don't mean like Pam Parker, the client. I'm the merchant. I want to read it and see what that feels like to me. And so I am really excited about this. I think we all can be really excited about this. We will definitely need your help because that operating guide should be a user-friendly, helpful guide that's easy to read, easy to skim, is formatted well. We'll let the lawyers do the English first, and then we'll kind of touch it up a little bit, right? But they are amazing, amazing partners. And they just needed to have someone to work with, right? Who cares? So I think that's a really good example of how we start with the user, the doc advisory group, and how we can execute pretty quickly, with no technologies, really, right? Just, time and effort. So really excited and proud about that. So how can you all participate, right? Marketing, I mean, you need to be engaged in all of this, right? Whether it's developing our products, our value proposition, how we speak about our products as a bundle, how we explain things to clients. I mean, my view is, and I've already, I think, leveraged Karen a little bit, with even a fee description, right? Our fee descriptions need to be rewritten on our statements, right? They don't explain what they really should mean. And so, I and the product people can come up with those types of things, but it's really good to have marketing partners who think like clients, who can have a view, right? And so I use the marketing partners that I've been exposed to so far in that way. So if you don't want to be used in that way, stay away from me. But I think it's so important, right? And I think the partnerships are really, really important. And we're building those across the whole organization. I think for the first time ever a few months ago, we had all the functional people in a room together while we were talking about the new products. And I don't know how else you do it, right? We're a big place. Everyone's doing a great job in each of their functions. They're experts in each of their functions. But from the client perspective, it's all got to knit together, right? It's got to be seamless. And the only way to do that is to create the connections. So I think in all of these different places where we talk about tool improvements, product commercialization and development, rewriting documents, what shows up online, you're all key in all of that. And I just ask you to always sit in the client's seat and always think like a client or a business consultant, right? Depending on what you're working on. Just always sit in their seat. I mean, I think that's the most important message. So, do I have time for questions?
Yes, you do. We can do 2 or 3 questions, Lisa, and if you don't mind restating them for the.
Oh, sure.
So my question is, I mean, I think for a lot of us who have been living for a while, this is music to our ears, everything you've done. But I would ask, so what's your vision for the rest of the company? And are there opportunities for best practices even ahead of you being able to get to those areas?
Yep. So the question was, great start on the SMB space. How do we then, and are we going to then move across the other, the other business lines and international, obviously? So the answer is absolutely. So you need to start somewhere, right? I mean, otherwise you're boiling the ocean and you're getting nothing done, right? Because we're not going to hire 1 million people to all of a sudden swoop all over the place. And so we've all just, agreed that there's huge opportunity in the SMB US space, and that's where we're starting. That model is absolutely going to be translated to the other businesses and internationally. And actually, we've kind of already started that. So what happened was Joe asked us to present to his sales advisory team what was happening with the document initiative, because he's a little passionate around this one, as you can imagine. And there were salespeople, sales leaders across the company. And so, of course, the FS people are jumping up and down and jumping up and down. And so I said, what are your top 3? And one of their key issues was the NDA. So we said, okay. So we took it back, and Debbie Swaim, who some of you might know from Hagerstown, is actually on my team. She's doc woman. She's in charge of docs. And so Debbie started researching. And you know what? We worked with the lawyers. There were 3 things we had to do. Some of it was process, some of it was communication, some of it was the form itself, and we're on a path to fix it. So that one we could just knock off, right? So we're going to do that. We're not going to lose sight, and we're keeping a list. So every time we hear of something, it goes on the list, and we're prioritizing. The question is, how fast can we get across everywhere? But the intention is for the same discipline and the same types of activities to happen across. But you got to start somewhere. Yes?
So I would second Lisa's comment that this hearing about client data and a lot of things you're talking about makes me want to stand up and cheer. We're so excited to hear
Good.
some of these things. As we're working with things, obviously we see things on a day-to-day basis. How do we ensure that we're connecting with your team effectively? It sounds like you're doing a lot of things that may be already headed down the path that we like to see. And how do we communicate, make sure that communication is going and that we're tapped into what you're already doing?
Okay. So the question was, how does the marketing team get tapped into what we're doing so we all stay connected, right? So that's a great question. So, I feel like I have good partnership with the product marketing folks, right? The Karen Kaukel and her team, right? We do a lot together. The question is, how do we broaden that? And I guess maybe Karen and I can take that away and think about how to do that. Is it a monthly update? We will certainly, once I actually have a team, we will be issuing, information that could be shared, much like we do with the integrated roadmap on the product side, things like that can be shared more broadly. But maybe there's a face-to-face that needs to happen as well. I would also encourage you all, as you see things or hear things that you think need to be focused on, just send them in, right? Just send them in, and we'll get them on the list. But it's a good point. We'll find a formal way to do that.
All right, I know we have.
We good?
Deborah?
Just in the calling they did now, having seen real business owners hit that page where they see the 99-page document.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jeff. Jeff, you're infringing on Pam's territory. But that's okay. I'm almost done.
One last question.
It's okay. One last question.
I'll just watch your heckle.
You'll heckle, I'm sure.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I was just going to say, I've seen them hit that 99-page document. I know others in the room have too in the midst of research. Thank you. Because at that point, I'm not even going to go to a company that requires 99 pages. But secondly, we've always wanted to print and save. And we've never allowed them to do that. So maybe you can add that.
Print and save. Okay, so Deborah's very excited about the doc initiative, but she's heard feedback about printing and saving. So you mean saving as a PDF?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. It's on the list now. Okay, so thank you all. I look forward to working with you all.
Okay, thank you, Pam. When she listed her priorities, it occurred to me, related to your question, Beth, that do we have strong owners in marketing assigned to her initiative, to Pam's initiative, so that she knows this is the person I need to talk to about statements or commercialization or whatever. So I think that's a takeaway for us to make sure that we're aligned with her key initiatives so that she doesn't have to guess about that.